Greetings, everybody. Once again, welcome to the Rec Poker Podcast. I am your host, Steve Fredlund, and today I'm excited to share with you an interview that I just did with phenomenal player Jason Seitz. I think you'll enjoy the conversation. A lot of good insight, and just great getting to know a little bit more of his story and how he thinks about the game. Quick shout out to the Free Poker Network, who has been sponsoring the Rec Poker Podcast. I know they've got their state and national tournaments coming up. So shout out to them. Good luck, everybody that's participating in the state in coming up here in April, May, and June. Good luck out in Vegas for those of you that make it out there. So with that, without further ado, why don't you listen up to this interview that I just had with Jason Seitz. All right, well, here with Jason Seitz, sitting at the kitchen table, enjoying a nice sunny day while we're inside. First of all, just thanks for taking the time for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We've had some opportunity to play together. You're one of those guys that always seems to own my soul. And I know there's strategy. I know there's thought behind that. For me, I'm just trying to figure out why is that I'm always uncomfortable playing against you. So I'm excited to get all your secrets now and be able to bust you. But I guess we're poker acquaintances. I've gotten to know you a little bit that way. But maybe if you wouldn't mind, just start out a little bit. How did you get into the game? What's your backstory for Texas Hold'em?
Well, in 2000, when Canterbury opened, I was a poker dealer, and like most, newbie poker players, I wanted to play poker, before and after work, and so I did, and I was a normal poker player. It was a progression for me. I mean, I generally lost most of the time when I was playing in the beginning, and today, I mean, I do much better. I think a lot of people problem when it comes to poker is patience, and I think I learned that part of the game very well because, I've always been a laid-back guy, but as far as patience is concerned, that's kind of what my strength, I think, is in poker now.
Did you pick up a lot of that from dealing and watching? Was that a huge part of learning the game? Or
I think it was just losing.
Something has to change.
Got me to change my strategies, I guess.
Were you a dealer before Canterbury opened somewhere else? Or?
No, that's when I learned how to deal and where I basically learned poker. I mean, I'm old school. I learned from hands-on playing, losing and winning. I haven't been a book reader, online. I dab on online these days, but because it's easy now. But
okay,
back when I was playing, there wasn't really much podcasting going on.
So how did you get better then? Was it just in your head, just kind of breaking down why am I losing and trying to figure that out, or did you approach it analytically or more? How did you approach getting better without external influence, I guess?
I think it is more of the more you do stuff, the more you learn. And I think the best way to learn is actually doing it and seeing it in person. I think that's the best way to learn anything. I mean, you can learn stuff by books and stuff, and if you don't apply it, you're really not learning it.
Yeah.
You're just seeing it, and you try different things. Like a smaller buy-in tournament, I'll try different things and, see, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next. But
I can read over and over again that ace-jack under the gun is not a great hand. But it took, losing with it several times to realize, well, maybe there is something to this.
Exactly.
So what are you playing now? Like, I guess, how much do you play? What sort of games? Are you doing this full-time, part-time? Kind of give us your current poker.
Well, I mean, tournament poker in Minnesota is, I don't know if anybody can say them full-time because, you're part-time. I live only a couple miles from Canterbury, and I'm only there once or twice a week playing tournaments or cash. And generally it's, if you live in Minnesota and you don't travel all the time, you're really a part-time poker player.
Right. And do you, between cash and tournaments, are you sort of 50-50, or how would you? Are you mostly cash and play big tournaments when they come through?
I'm mostly tournaments right now. I'm about 75-25 for tournaments and cash. Usually if I get knocked out of a tournament, I'll go play cash. I wouldn't recommend that because that's not usually the best time to play cash. But
because your emotional state, or just say you maybe aren't playing your A game? Or?
Yeah, probably not playing your A game. And, if you get knocked out early in the tournament, you'd probably be all right. But if you get knocked out later on, you're in a tournament mode. And going to tournament mode and cash is two different games. But a lot of times in cash, I play PLO in Omaha, so it's a completely different game. So it doesn't matter too much for me. But for most people, going from like a no-limit tournament to a limit cash is not recommended.
It's too big of a shift.
It is.
Okay, so in terms of tournaments, what are you playing? Do you play any of the weeklies, or is it when the bigger tournaments come through?
Like locally, I'll play Wednesday night at Canterbury, and I'll play when the bigger tournaments come in. And,
okay.
Like my wife just became a poker dealer, so she travels to deal poker, and I'll go with her. And we did 3 stops in the last 2 months. So like I had like 6 weeks of poker.
So which tour is that you're?
Like she did the WSOP circuit.
Okay.
And then she did Chicago CPC.
Okay. Do you go out to Vegas then for the World Series at all?
Yeah,
Do you both go out there then? Or
we'll both go out there this year in end of May. So.
Is that something you normally do every year?
Last year was my first year of doing it for the whole time.
How did it go?
I went well. Had a 10th place finish, and I cashed 6 times, but 2 World Series, 2 Venetian, and 2, I think it was Planet Hollywood.
Okay, they're part of their famous
Yes.
series. Okay, so was it a profitable summer out there?
It was a profitable summer. I think I netted about $10,000 after all expenses. So.
Okay, that's a good thing. It's better than the opposite. Maybe not all you're looking for, but it's better than the opposite, I guess.
Had a couple chances at the World Series. That 10th place finish, I mean, you move up 1 spot, and that's $8,000 more.
Which event was that? Or not necessarily number, but was it
a $1,500 no limit?
Okay.
2260, I think, was the number for the number of entrants.
Okay.
And I finished 10th. And
yeah, how do you feel about that? And generally, that curve. Obviously, we all know, and there's always this debate about the curve and whether that's your weekly $30 tournament at Running Aces or it's your World Series of Poker. You get that far, you get 10th out of 2,300 people, and I'm sure the payday was good. But when you look at, boy, if I could just made it 2 or 3 more spots, how do you feel about that curve, that structure?
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I think it should be more flat, but I know that they had that big debate about Running Aces, whether they should pay 10% or 15%.
Right.
I mean, I would lean towards the 12 to 15% payout structure compared to the 10, but
still keep the kind of slope at the top 3 the way it is. I mean, the advantages are you can say, hey, this person won this much. There's some real marketing pull. There's some real playing to win. It increases the aggression.
Yeah, I can definitely see why, the WSOP does what they do as far as top heavy, and, there's a lot of, pull when you see someone making $400, $2,000. Nobody knows about where it finishes 9th or 10th or even 2nd sometimes.
Right.
So, I mean, they want to see the headlines.
Yeah, I always think from a recreational poker perspective, at least myself and others, there's a lot of the bigger tournaments. I've had some success at like the 280s and that sort of thing, but realistically, we're not going to find ourselves in those spots. So you tend to shy away because, okay, a great result for me at a 280 might be doubling my buy-in, which is nice and good and that sort of thing, but it's harder to say, well, I'm going to go take a shot here because I know unless the deck absolutely hits me in the head, I'm not going to be final tabling or going super deep. So it can be sort of a resistance for the recreational players, but I do get the other side of it as well. I think paying out more slots is probably more of a benefit from a pure building the game because,
I agree.
Just from people like myself that go and play a $75 tournament, if I min cash for $90, I feel like I won. My hobby was complete. I didn't lose money playing my hobby, and I'm going to be back playing again.
I agree 100%. And that's why I think paying more spots. Like last year's WSOP did 15%,
Right.
which I think worked out well for them. I mean, their numbers seem to be growing.
Yeah.
And really, when it comes to tournament poker, I mean, I don't think anybody does it better than WSOP.
Yeah.
I mean, they try different things. If it works, they keep it going, and if it doesn't, they get rid of it.
Yeah.
But it seems like whenever they do something, they do it right, it seems like.
Yeah. Well, switching gears a little bit, you talked about patience being one of your core competencies, if you will. Sorry, I'm a business guy, so I talk in terms of things like that. But how else would you categorize your own play? And I know poker players don't necessarily like to be labeled themselves, and I know it all depends on the table and stuff. But in general, are you more like a field player or an analytical GTO type guy? Or are you into sort of the patient guy? Are you more on the aggressive side or more on the passive side? In general, if you were to look at yourself relative to your peers, how would you describe your game?
I would say passive aggressive.
So you're Minnesotan.
Yeah.
You did say you were born in Minnesota, so passive aggressive would fit very well. Well, what do you mean by that? Unpack that a little bit.
Well, like a lot of people will 3-bet certain hands, and a lot of times I will just call. And if I'm more of a be considered aggressive, I'd be 3-betting those every time.
So you're okay.
I will take the conservative route more times than I will especially early in the tournaments where, as usually happens, I mean, only bad things usually happen early in the tournaments. I mean, you're there to play a long stretch of a tournament, and to be at risk an hour into the tournament just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
So I'll take a more conservative route and see a flop, with a big hand compared to getting an all-in pre, which, the deck can do anything it wants to do.
Right. So it's more of a pot control type of approach. Now you have to balance that. I mean, I'm always interested in this. I agree with that. But you have a fairly big hand. You've got the ace king, ace queen, pocket tens, pocket nines, pocket jacks, even fairly big hand. But you've got a raise and you get a call. There's always that. For me, there's always this tension of I don't want to play a big pot early. I mean, I want to win a big pot early, but I don't really want to play a big pot early. But I also don't want to play those necessarily four-handed. So is that a logical sort of thinking that you do, or is it more just an instinctual thing as far as, if you got a raise and a call, do you 3-bet there just to thin the field versus, no, I'm just almost going to be set mining with my tens here?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I'll take the approach of set mining the tens or peeling off a flop, say I'm raising with tens and I get 3-betted, I'll flat call most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, a lot of people will either raise or shove, and I just think calling there is a better spot than it is, you're not going to fold, and you don't want to risk your tournament life on, a pair of tens.
Right, if you shove, you're only going to get called by something ahead of you, I assume.
Exactly.
Okay.
But, there's approaches, there's many ways to play any hand.
Right.
And, I'll change gears too, but for the most part, I'll flat.
So as the stacks get shallower, as you get deeper into the tournament, that's more of a decision around.
Yeah, I mean,
do I want to go with this hand?
You're 10x,
Right.
You don't have much choices. There it's chips dictate how you're going to play a hand.
Yep.
At times, so.
But you said passive aggressive. So we've covered kind of the passive side, but the aggressive side, more aggressive post flop, or do you mean just passive until the?
Well, I'd say if I have chips and I feel like I have good control of the table, I'll be the aggressive one, and I'll just take control. When especially in position.
Yeah.
I'll definitely do that plenty of times, and a lot of times it dictates by where I'm playing, who I'm playing against, and when you play locals and half the people on the table, and what you can get away with and what you can't.
Mm-hmm.
that's why I do enjoy traveling to different places where they don't know you. And I do recommend people trying that because, I mean, if you're playing at the same spot and playing with the same players, you probably ain't going to get much better. You're probably just going to basically flatline and do the same. I recommend traveling, seeing different spots and seeing where you do well and see where you don't.
So you don't know them, so you lose that edge, but they don't know you, which is probably a bigger edge, especially in your case, where more people know who you
Exactly.
are. You know, I guess I think about, you said, depending on who you're playing and different your position, and one of the things I think about you, this is right or wrong, but we've played maybe, I don't know, half a dozen times
Probably.
where we've been at the same table, and you, like I said, I feel like you've owned me, and so much of that is, whether it's just happenstance or not, you're in position on me, and you're floating me, and it's driving me insane. And so, whether you're just floating me because you're waiting to see weakness and then coming back over the top, or if you actually are doing pot control with a bigger hand, whatever that is, you don't have to get down your whole strategy there, but you talked about playing the player. I assume that's part of what goes into your decision against playing against me or other people that are similar with less experience, how you approach that versus, if I'm Mike Schneider making a raise, I don't know how much respect you have for Mike, but one of the bigger names, more experienced players making a raise, and how you respond to that pre-flop or post-flop is going to be different, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's definitely different. I mean, like Mike's generally a tighter player, but he'll be looser post-flop or pre-flop. I mean, but post-flop, I mean, I put him in that ABC category where generally if he's betting, he has it.
But somebody like me, that even if I have it, or people similar to me, I assume that's a great spot for somebody like yourself to float and just kind of see what transpires. Either you have some equity in your hand, or you're just waiting for weakness. Or
generally if I float, though, I have some equity. I'll have a draw of some sort. I won't just float someone just for the sake of floating, but
yeah. And I will say I did win one big hand against you.
That
at least.
was at Aces. I remember.
I do remember. Yeah, well, of course. The one time that I beat you, but same sort of thing where you had a massive draw. I remember. I think you had a straight and a flush draw, and I had a top pair sort of situation. So I did hold up once against you at least. But normally my experience with you is not so much getting to showdown and losing hands. It's coming at you, raising with ace king and you calling, and then the board doesn't connect, and I continuation bet, and I think, I'm going to fire one more at the turn, and finally I'm like in this weird awkward spot of, okay, I didn't connect. He's just floating me, I think. I don't know. Is he trapping me? And then until I give up on the river and you make a small bet and win the pot or whatever. So it's an interesting, I think, dynamic that I've learned a lot just from playing with you. Like, okay, well, that drives me crazy. Can I drive somebody else crazy with that same move? So, I mean, I tried on the people.
Generally, it will work. It's just a matter of, you got to have some equity. You can't just float just for the sake of floating. Because, I mean, you do make, I make a small bet on the river, floating, and, if I have to have something, because if I'm going to make a small bet into a big pot, they're generally going to call me.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, I usually have some equity.
Yeah.
I'm just not floating you.
Well, I think you're floating me. I think you're floating me, just waiting for the moment I check, and then you pounce. I don't know. That's what it feels like to me. So you talk about patience. Are there other things that have been whatever success you've had? And let me take a break. So success, I looked on Hendon Mob, and I know people have different perspectives on Hendon Mob, but just to get a feel for where you're at. And as of right now, you're rated, the GPI, the Global Poker Index, has you 561. It's pretty solid. I mean, you think about however they're rating people, whatever you think about that, but 561st. And so you're right in there with people like Andrew Chewy. Chewy, what's his last name? Lichtenberger or something like that? Or...
Yeah, I can't remember.
but Matt Berkey, Josh Beckley, Jason Les, Shannon Shore, those guys are all kind of in that same place. So people that I see on TV, I'm like, that's pretty cool. But Minnesota, you're ranked 35th all-time in money in Minnesota. So obviously you're a very well-achieved poker player, whether you think you've achieved everything you want to or not. But what would you say as you look at whatever success you've had, what are the keys? Why are you successful? I mean, clearly it's not just patience. There's other things too. Like, what are those things that you would look at as being your keys?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, like before, when money wasn't was more tighter, and money was an issue with me. I wouldn't play as freely and as loosely and as many times as I wanted to. And now money is more. It's I have enough to play most tournaments that I want to, and
yeah, I actually saw you were just stirring your drink with a $100 bill there. So maybe not quite that much.
But I have money now. I can play more higher stakes tournaments without worrying about my bankroll. I think that's where most people have problems when money is too tight. They play differently, and I don't know if that's for everybody, but I know in my case, in my younger days, I think that was probably the case.
Well, it's a big thing for me. People have asked me to play different events and offered to stake me in different things, and I'm trying to be disciplined in what I play because I know I will play different. Like I can play I think I could play like 1100 and still not really play too different. For me, that would be a big buy-in. But if we start talking about playing the marathon at the World Series of Poker, or playing the main event, and I just know that I won't take those spots that I should take because of the money. And I think if I'm going to play suboptimally, and I'm already playing against the best people in the world, that's probably not a good combination.
That's true.
So anyway, playing the games that you feel comfortable playing, where you can play your A game.
Yeah, I think a lot of my like in cash out play like 40-80 mixed game, and I know most of those players are at their top of their game. You'll have one or two players that you can play off of, but most of them are really solid. And I like playing against better players, and I do all right. I don't beat them consistently like I'd hope, but I enjoy different games of mix. You play Hold'em, Omaha, and Stud 8. I enjoy playing those different games. I'll probably won't beat them like I'd beat the 2040 game, but I'd have more fun playing it.
So why do you enjoy playing against better players?
I like to get better. In order to get better, I think you need to play against better players. Learn. I don't know if you learn a lot playing limit poker compared to no limit. I think I learned a lot last couple of weeks playing with Maurice Hawkins.
Sure.
I think he's a very good player, and played with him a couple times at Council Bluffs and once in Tulsa. And
I have a good story about him.
I think he's very solid.
I have a good story about Maurice Hawkins. So I was playing, I interrupt people, that's what I do. But I was playing, I've been to Vegas one time, I was there for something else, but it was during the World Series, so I played some of the dailies. And I made a pretty deep run in one of the daily deep stacks deal, and he came to the table, and I'd recognize him from, I don't know, one of the TV shows or whatever. And he came in, he was just a big personality. He's just going to run over the table and all this stuff. And he's like, you guys don't even know who I am. And he was just kind of laying it out there. I know who we are. And he busted within like 20 minutes. But kind of a fun story to meet him. He just, he was kind of layering that on. Like, I'm the guy to beat. And you guys should all just walk away right now. But it seemed like a genuinely a nice guy and a good player.
Yeah, he's generally a nice guy. He's a little nicer earlier in tournaments than he is later in tournaments. He can get under people's skin,
Is that intentional? Is that part
I think
of
it is part of intentional.
Speech play? And
I think Blake has that type of game, which I think, when you're really good to great, you're going to have that confidence and aura of yourself, and sometimes it doesn't come off great, but
right.
Deep down inside, both of those people are nice guys outside of poker, and even at the poker table, they seem to be having fun. And
yeah, and I've never even played with Blake. I've been in the room with him, but I've never been at the same table. So I would like to do that. We're going to get him on the show at some point, too. He said he'd like to be interviewed as well. But it begs the question, William Kassouf in the main event last year, the speech play, and obviously it's all edited, and so you don't get the whole story. But what do you think about that? His mannerisms, both in terms of taking forever to make decisions or to at least act, and then also the speech play.
Yeah, I've seen that, from different people, different styles, and I'm not a fan of it. I'm definitely not a fan of taking forever on a hand. Mm-hmm. It drives me crazy, but it's it's the player's responsibility to call clocks on people, and I don't think they do it enough, especially at the World Series. And he's obviously doing it for more of a delay than he is doing it for. And the speech play, I'm surprised he got away with it as much as he did. Especially with that lady. I mean,
oh my gosh, yeah.
He tore her apart, really. I mean,
that was pretty rough. Yeah. Okay, I was just curious what your take was like. Because I've heard both ways. People say, well, it's just part of the game if the rules allow it. And maybe, but wow, I mean, by the end, the energy when his kings ran into aces was pretty profound.
That was the best part about the whole thing. I mean, I'm glad he busted out. I went to want to see him at the final table. I mean, he's done really well after that. So he's actually.
But when they have the final table and they broadcast it, quote unquote live, where you're actually seeing in real time, that would have been almost unwatchable if he was taking 4 or 5 minutes every decision. Okay.
But I mean, I've seen that people do that style just to move up in the money too.
Yeah.
And technically it works.
Especially in a qualifier, before you get that bubble, before it's hand to hand.
Exactly.
It's almost painful. But I get it. If you're a short stack, you have every incentive to sit there and tank until somebody calls clock, take the full minute.
It's true.
Yeah.
So I cashed my first World Series main event.
Oh, is that right? Were you doing the tanking?
I was a short stack, and I was taking my time.
Yeah, and that's what, $15,000 for the min cash basically, or that's a huge.
It was 15. Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? Frankly.
Yeah, and it was worth it at the time. I look back at it and I think I don't think I did anything wrong. I just think I don't think you can get away with that way. I wasn't taking as long as they did now, and they were calling clocks. So I only got clocked once, but I was definitely utilizing the minute.
So you mentioned the World Series of Poker cash. Now I didn't have a chance to go look. I know your best cash on Hendon Mob is like $101,000. Where was that? What's the background?
Canterbury Poker Night in America, the one in August.
That's right. Yeah.
That was one of those tournaments that it was a weird tournament because with 20-some players left, I'm folding aces on a dry board, which is something I don't think I've ever done, to be honest with you.
Can you break that down a little bit? What was the... was it because of the payout structure, or just that your read was that you're no good?
Well, my read was that I was beat. I didn't know how, and I didn't know what he had, but I thought I was beat. And I never found out if I was beat or not. It just happened I played heads up with him, at the final table and ended up beating him. So it turned out to be a good story, but I have no idea if I made the right laydown or not at that time.
So what was that like? With the Poker Night in America, obviously they've got the TV crew, and how did that change? Was it just more harder to stay focused, or did it change anything with the structure and how you played? Or
like they have that at Heartland Poker, and I played that like 10 years ago, and when they had, that was back when that's all we had back then, was Heartland before the MSPT came. So I played a couple times in the cameras. It really didn't affect my game at all, but I've seen a few players that played a little differently. I think Waz played a little differently than he normally would, but I don't know if it was the cameras or if he just didn't really like his hand or.
Okay, so he was less aggressive than
he was a little
typical.
less than normal.
And it's hard to know. Is that the hand, or is that an intentional change? Or
you see the hand on camera, so what his hand is, but
okay.
Maybe he has history of that hand where, that's the reason he chose to fold it.
Right. Well, congrats either way on a huge score.
Yeah, that was good.
So even somebody that plays a lot as much as you do and has had a lot of nice scores, is that still, satisfying in terms of not just I play poker, I'm supposed to win once in a while. It's a monetary sort of a logician's approach to it. Internally for you, do you feel like, man, I feel proud of that achievement?
Yeah, I'm definitely proud of that achievement. I'll definitely, that's what we play for. We play to win. More times than not, you're not going to win.
It turns out.
And more times than not, you're not even going to cash.
Right.
But that's definitely the reason why we all play the game. It's a competitive I don't know if people want to call it a sport or not, but it's definitely keeps people competitive.
See, my theory on if it's a sport or not is if you can play defense. So you can argue you could play defense or not. Like golf, for example. I'm not ripping on golf, but it's hard for me to say it's a sport unless I could be standing next to the guy yelling at him or clapping my hands, or if I could play defense somehow, if I could wave my arms in front of the ball if I wanted. So, but no, it's cool. It's a great score. So as you think about obviously you play some of the weekly tournaments, you've played some of the smaller binds, you play some of the bigger ones. You're playing with this mix of players all the time, cash or tournaments. What do you see as the biggest mistakes made at the table, or categories of the biggest mistakes where, you as a very experienced player are probably just smiling on the inside going, "Ooh, baby, that was not good." And so as us recreational players or, less experienced players are coming in, trying to move up in stakes little by little, knowing we all have blind spots, knowing we all have holes, knowing we all have all of this data that we're supposed to be thinking about, but we don't have, it's not internalized yet, and so we want to focus on those big mistakes. I guess, what do you see as those categories or those biggest mistakes that are consistently made?
My biggest mistake I see people do is overplaying kings and aces. And from what I've seen, I'm seeing people typically 3, 4, 2, 3, 4x, a pot, and some reason this guy just had a sudden 6 or 7x a pot. I'm going, he must, have like a small pair or something. He doesn't want to see it. And then everybody folds, of course, and then he shows kings or aces. I'm going, why would you do that? It just doesn't make sense. But I've seen it a lot of times, recreational players.
So overplaying in terms of just betting too much, being scared of being beat, or
playing scared with big hands. And if there's a hand you want to play, you want to play with the big hands.
Right.
And to me, overbetting pre-flop with those hands is the biggest mistake I see.
It's always this rub. I totally agree with you. Like I want, people are like, well, this is my favorite hand. I'm like, well, it's still aces for me. But I just had the situation the other day where somebody raised, somebody called. They went 3x call, and I went to 9x because I had aces. I wanted to play heads up, and end up with 3 callers on that thing. And so, the flop comes 2, 3, 4, and I ended up busting in that spot, the way it worked out. A long story. But, afterwards I was talking to somebody, they're like, well, geez, I would have gone 18x or whatever, just some mega number just to take the blinds that are, or the 7 big blinds that are out there or whatever. And I was like, I'm just not that kind of player.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend that. Overbetting big hands like that, you want to, that was just one hand out of, how many hands you play like that, and you don't lose and you don't remember it because you didn't lose.
Right.
Because generally you'll remember the hands you lose. You won't really remember the ones you win.
Right. No, that's actually physiological. It's true. You forget the negative things way more than you remember, or you remember the negative things way more than you remember the positive things. Yeah.
Sad but true.
Of course, then I have the same tournament out in Vegas that I was telling you about earlier with Maurice Hawkins. I was in the big blind with 5 deuce, and the guy min raises with aces. So of course I call. And the flop comes king 5-2, and he ships 70 big blinds, just open shoves 70 big blinds. And so I snap him off, and of course he berates me all the way out.
Of course.
But then all the way out he's saying, well, I wanted a caller. Like, okay, well, you wanted a caller that didn't hit. Which is it? And so there's the opposite side of it too. That's where I thought when you were saying overplaying aces, that's what I thought you meant, getting married to that one pair.
No, what I've seen is just overbetting it myself.
Well, that's good.
Obviously people get married to them too, but
right.
From what I've seen, most of the mistakes I see is pre-flop, and then
so just giving away value.
Yes.
That's in that hand. Any other sort of mistakes that you see, categories?
Well, there's a lot of people that overplays their ace highs. I don't see I see people not folding the flush draws but I don't a lot of times when you have some value there, I don't see why they should be playing it anyway for the most part. I wouldn't risk their tournament for it, but
so you're saying they're staying too long in with flush draws?
Sometimes they stay in too long,
Not getting the right price?
Not getting the right price.
Okay.
That's probably the word I should have said.
Okay. And so in those situations, you tend to think, well, they should have just folded, or they should have taken a more aggressive line and semi-bluffed in general?
Well, they're flattened, which is probably the right approach if they're doing with the flush draw. But they'll get married to them and they'll call off, on a flush draw, which generally it's never a good idea.
Okay. So I'll bring up this really vague situation, and it's intentionally vague.
Okay.
But the idea is for you to tell me, well, what pieces of information are missing that you'd have to have? Because normally, with the other recreational players, we break down hands and we have all of the information. Everything from all the chip stacks to what type of player they've been, what's the action been recently, frequencies, all of that thing. And then we break it down and make a decision. But what I'm trying to get at is, what are those really key pieces of information that you'd absolutely have to have? So I'll give you a really vague situation. You tell me, well,
okay,
this is pointless without this. So I need to know what this is.
Okay.
Under the gun raises, the cutoff calls, you pick up ace jack. What do you do?
Where am I? What position am I?
You're on the button.
Oh, I'm on the button.
Yeah, you're on the button. So the under the gun raises, cutoff calls, you're on the button with ace jack.
Well, I have history with ace jack, and it's generally not good.
No. You want to get something else, king queen or something?
So, ace jack, is a strong hand, but under good raise probably has me beat. But I'm not going to fold ace jack there, and I generally ain't going to 3-bet that unless I know that player well enough to 3-bet him. Generally they're going to respect my 3-bet, but being I'm on the button, they may not respect it as much. Mm-hmm. So generally, a lot of times I'll flat there and disguise my ace jack, which isn't really disguising because it's not. To me, I don't categorize that as a really strong hand.
Mm-hmm.
But that might have something to do with the history of me not winning with it as much as.
But you're saying it's too strong to fold.
Correct.
Okay.
So generally, I'll either, if I do 3-bet, and if I get 4-betted, there's no way I'm continuing with the hand.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, I'll flat. For the most part, I'll flat with that hand.
Which is part of your overall philosophy of, in general, let's see a flop, control the pot.
Control the pot, and you're in a position with a pretty good hand.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it's fairly disguised, like you said. It's not super disguised, but it's fairly disguised.
Correct.
Because a lot of people will 3-bet that in position.
And you're going against an undergun raiser, which most times is going to have that hand beat or has a pocket pair.
So what I've heard you say implicit in that is the only consideration I've heard so far is the type of player. That might change. If they're hyper aggressive, you might 3-bet them. If they're super tight, you could potentially even fold, I suppose.
And a lot of it has to do with my chip size, what time where are we at in the blinds compared to my chip stack.
So talk about that a little bit. Like here's one of the things that we struggle with a little bit as Rex or less experienced players. We're all Rex, I guess, to some degree, but
Sure.
Less experienced players is, okay, I can pay attention and I can say, oh, they have 50 big blinds and I have 20 big blinds. Or they have 20 big blinds and I have 50 big blinds. Look at me, I'm really proud of myself. I paid attention to that. So what? So when you say it depends on my stack size, tell us a little bit more about what matters, like what stack sizes might change what you do.
Well, say I have 15 blinds or less. I'm in a shove mode compared to if I have 50 big blinds, and he has 50 big blinds. We're both deep. You want to make sure you get to see a flop, and I'll pot control that and just call. But if you're, like I say, if your 15 blinds are smaller, you may want to shove.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't recommend calling, four, you're going to be down to 11%. You see a flop and you miss, you might as well just shove her home.
So shove or fold maybe at that point?
Correct.
Okay. And so what if so say I have 15 and they have 15. what does that tell us? If they under the gun raise and the 3X and they have 15 big blinds, is that more of a sign of strength, or timidity, or?
To me, it's usually a sign of strength. I mean, generally, the person that has that many blinds wants a caller if they're going to only exit with 15 bigs.
Right.
They're going to be strong in their holdings, I'm sure. And a lot of times, I'll see that, and I'm not going to get this guy off this hand. I probably don't have him beat right now, so I'm more apt to fold than I will just call that spot or shove. I think I'd shove. I think I'd fold more than I would any other play in that spot.
Do you generally disregard the first caller as somebody that's fairly weak? I mean, in terms of, obviously in a squeeze situation, you're thinking about that a lot. But in that
under
place,
gun, like a caller.
Well,
play?
So the under the gun raise and the cutoff, just the person just to your right called. When you're thinking about do I fold, call, or raise, how much consideration do you give to the first caller?
Like that under the gun person, I'm going to put more strength than I am the cutoff person who just calls. But that under the gun, if they limp, like a lot of times I've been seeing this lately, is people limping with big hands.
And the cutoff, you're saying, so they just flatted the first one?
I'm saying like the under the gun person.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of raising, their standard raise, they're just limping in. If this person's not normally a limper, red flags are going to be
buyer
pounding.
beware.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this numerous of times in the last week or two, and it just...
You're looking to limp raise?
That's all they're doing, is just trying to limp raise, and you can see it, and that's where, to me, reopening the situation, I'd rather see a cheaper flop. And because this guy, I feel, if he's limping, he's not a limper, he has a short stack, relatively short stack.
Right.
All he's looking to do is limp raise.
Yeah, and if you know you're going to be raise folding, it doesn't make sense to raise then.
Correct.
Okay.
You're better off just seeing a flop.
So what difference does it make if, let's say you're both fairly deep stacked, does it matter if they have 70 big blinds and you have 40 versus they have 40 and you have 70? Does that change how you would approach that situation, or do you just say, we're both deep stacked, let's see where this takes us?
Yeah, I would consider they're both deep and see where it takes us. I mean, obviously you want to be in the 70s more than the 40, but to me, I position them, they're basically the same,
You're just saying the effective stack is 40, whether it's
yeah,
whoever's driving that?
Correct.
Okay. Because I know some people, there's a train of thought out there, at least for, well, I don't want, if they've got me covered versus I got them covered, and survival is such a big part of tournament poker, it might change a little bit who I'm willing to dance with. But I tend to be more of, we're both deep stack. Yes, I'll consider that as we start approaching, the turn in the river.
Yeah, I consider them basically, we're both deep stack, and I'm more concerned about how that person generally plays more than I am. Whereas chip stack is, if we're both deep, I'm not going to worry if they're 40 or 70. I'm more concerned how they play certain hands, and more leaning on the past history that I have with them, and from what I'm observing at the table.
And so, at what stack size do you start to say, as you're getting deeper in the tournament, and you're going from 200 big blinds to 100 and on down? At what stack size do you start feeling your game changing?
Well, when you're at 20 bigs, I mean, generally you're going to be at that stage where, you're going to be shoving more, and you're going to be,
right.
Re-raising your lot.
Yeah, but your 3-bets are a shove, and yeah. So at 30 or 40 bigs, you feel like you're still playing your regular
Yeah, I think
game?
I'm at a regular game.
Okay.
I mean, here in Minnesota, we're generally at that 30, 40 bigs pretty quick.
For sure,
so,
yeah.
I think Minnesota players are generally better playing short-handed or short stack, in general from what I've seen from traveling. It seems like Minnesota players are better short stack players than like players outside of Minnesota.
So are you saying like in other states, the weekly tournaments even are a deeper structure, or just because outside of the weekly tournaments here, you're playing the bigger events that have the deeper structures? Or
I'm just saying our weekly tournaments aren't as deep. In other parts of the country that I play I'm generally not playing weekly tournaments. I'm playing their, WSB circuit or something where there's deeper,
like hour-long levels or whatever they might be.
Yeah.
Okay.
And WSOP circuits there are like 30 minutes for the first 12 levels. I mean, it's generally similar, but those are all those places. You have to get a stack early, to be able to make some noise.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you think about like we talked about some of the most common mistakes, some of the ways to approach this vague situation, but like key concepts. If you're to think about people that are just learning the game, or they've just been playing in the Free Poker Network or Straight Flush Poker Tour, or they're playing the $30 buy-in, or they're just playing their home game and they want to move to that next level. And I know it's been a while since you've thought about that early on stage, but with all of these different things that we talk about on the podcast, with all these different things that we're supposed to consider, stack sizes, ranging people, 3-bet strategies, lag tag, all of these different things that we're thinking about, what are some of those key concepts you'd say these are foundational? You really have to get a hold of these, other than what beats what. What are some of those just critical things you have to have a master of?
Well, to me, obviously those are important too, but to me, I think they gotta get to ABC poker. They gotta funnel, get their easy part of the game down strong. They gotta be strong at the easiest part of the games. Whether they need to be shoving with their flush draws and straight draws, they have a spot where they can do that. Whether they can be playing basic, as far as calling here, raising, they gotta get that basic pre flops down, and they gotta get post flops down. A lot of it has to do with playing more. The more they play, the more they're gonna learn.
Mm-hmm. So would you recommend then, in terms of ABC, as somebody's first learning the game, get a handle of what opening hand ranges are, even though as you get more advanced, there's more of a feel to it that you're adjusting to the table dynamics, but maybe start with here's the range of hands that you play under the gun all the way through to the button. Yeah, here's what you continuation bet.
That's definitely where they should start. Mm-hmm. And the more they get a grasp of where they, once they get that part down, then the game will become a lot easier. Mm-hmm. You'll get chips in front of you, and that'll just help their game a lot more than if they're playing every other hand and going bust.
Right. And I saw this move on TV where a guy 3-bet with 7 deuce, or 3 bets with 7 deuce, and triple barreled all the way through and won a big pot. I think sometimes you get enamored with those sorts of things. Go, ooh, I'm going to try that, and you realize there's actually more of a method and a strategy behind that than.
Yeah, definitely. That person probably had it set up where they've had hands previous where they are labeled or he's playing tight, and so he just decided to play a hand.
Right. They've only shown down monsters, and yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't recommend that.
So, right. Especially with no equity at all. Right. But okay. So playing ABC poker, which is really just straightforward. Bet when you have it, call when you have it, whatever. Don't get too crazy.
Yeah, I think in those smaller tournaments, people that play that way generally last longer, and they're going to have more opportunity later on in tournaments. Your tournament aren't generally going to be won or lost in the first couple hours. They're going to be won in the later rounds. The last 2 hours is when you're going to make your hands. It's going to make or break your stack. You're going to double up, triple up, or you're going to go bust.
Yeah, it helps me to always think, and I went from hyper conservative and nitty to, aggression. I like that. I went hyper aggressive, and I feel like I'm trying to settle in on wherever that is. But you start. What's helped me try to balance that is say, okay, I played this tournament at Grand Casino Mille Lacs the other day. whatever. And so you start with 12,000 chips, and I had looked, and it wasn't a big entry, but I said, okay, to be at average stack, not that average stack is everything, but to be at average stack by the time we cash, I need to have like 100,000 chips. So that helps me frame that. Because so when you're in a pot where there's 4,000 chips in the middle, you think, oh, I want that, I want to go after that. And of course, it is nice to build a stack early. Like, am I going to risk this for 4,000 chips knowing I'm really going to need at least 100,000 chips by the time we get to the final table? So I think that's helped me at least keep that in perspective. That I need to survive and build enough so that when I get into those 50,000 chip pots, those might be worth going after.
Yeah, exactly. I think you've nailed it. I mean, you really should have some sort of game plan. Every tournament you should have a game plan. And knowing what it takes to get to the final table as far as a chip stack is really easy to calculate, and everybody should have that down. But, you know, they should have shorter term goals too. You know, it's, you know, the break is in an hour. You know, maybe I should have, you know, 20-30% more than what they have right now. They should be able to move their stacks a little higher.
Yeah, I think people don't understand how it's a non-linear average stack growth as you lose people. You lose the first person in a 100-person tournament. The average stack doesn't change much.
Correct.
When you're down to 20 people, you lose one. That's a pretty big bump, and I think people don't realize that. And I think that's part of for the rec players listening out there. I think part of why people get into that middle stage of the tournament and they just blind off or they don't know what to do because they don't realize they need to build a lot more than they are. They think, oh, I'm at 30 big blinds, I'm at average stack. Not realizing that in the next hour, that average stack is going to be at least double where it is now.
I played at Aces, and I was playing against this tight player. You know, it was a bounty tournament, so everybody's just licking their chops, saying, "Are you going to go all in eventually?" So
right.
So we go over the top, and this guy would just keep blinding up, and he said he's sitting there with 1,600, and the blinds are 1,000, 2,000, and the antes are like 300,
Right.
and he's just thinking that, well, I got 4 more hands. I went,
Yeah.
do you really have 4 more hands?
Right.
Are you giving yourself a shot? You're really giving yourself no shot right now.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, really, he should have never been in that spot in the first place.
Right.
Because all he was doing was blinding himself down.
Yeah, and so then you blind off more, and then you triple up even to, 2 big blinds?
Yeah.
You know, that's the hard part. And I think part of that is, I think there's a fear of losing. I think people don't want their day to be over, because they're playing it for fun. But I also think there's no understanding, I think, of, like, hand equity at all. Like, even deuce 7 against ace king, what is that, 35-40%?
Correct.
I mean, you're going to win a fair amount of that sort of thing. And so, people are like, you have 8 big blinds left, and they're just scared to get their money in with Jack 10 of clubs on the button in an unraised pot. Because, well, Jack 10 is not very good. Well, no, but considering the equity and, you still fold equity, that whole dynamic, but then also hand equity, if you do get called. And I think people just don't understand that some of those hands are... You're still going to get as an underdog, of course, but the alternative in just blinding off so that you can later double up to where you are now,
Correct,
doesn't give you any chance to win the tournament.
Yeah, and that was my problem early in my poker life, is I needed to learn that part of it. I mean, you can't get yourself in the spot where you have 5 big blinds and you're then you're coming into the big blind soon. When you have, like, when you know it's your big blind coming up, you need to be shoving it the next 3 hands.
Right.
You got to pick a hand and just go with it.
But then there's some guys that do that. I know some of these guys, and they're listening to this right now, and you know who you are, who do this thing, and I'm always like, you got to get your chips in, and you don't, and you end up going deep in the tournament because you somehow survive at the right time. So there is that piece where I think I can be on the other side of it too, where I can punt off a stack too early. I'm sitting at 13 big blinds, and I got king 7, and let's just steal blinds, and and, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, that's not the right play, I don't think.
No, not with king 7.
No, exactly. Well, exactly. That's what I do. And Taylor, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So there is a balancing piece of it, and I think that is maybe what you're talking about, just experience. I do that enough times. You're like, okay, I'm sick of doing that. And then, you blind off too much, and you're like, okay, I'm sick of being in a position where I'm shoving with 2 big blinds and I get 7 callers in a bounty tournament.
Exactly.
So I think the experience does tell you more than books probably ever will.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so looking to the future, what's on tap for you? Got plans for the summer a little bit here, it sounds like, but what's coming up?
Well, I'm going to Baltimore in 2 weeks and play a WSOP circuit, and then after that I'll go to spend the summer at the Rio.
Nice. Do you guys rent a place out there? Or how do you do that?
Last year I rented a place. This year I'm gonna stay with my wife has a friend that lives in Vegas, so
Nice.
we'll stay at their house.
Okay. We're taking our first road trip out there. We got four, 5, 6 guys are going to road trip out there. We're renting a condo for a week or so out there. So
when are you going out there?
June 10 through 18, somewhere in that ballpark.
I'm going end of May, so I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to get my car there, because driving there is it's a long drive.
It's a long drive, yeah. We're going to road trip. We've never done this before. We know it's like 24 hours of driving. But I think what we're looking forward to is part of just the poker discussion and building those relationships. But we're like, I'm sure by the time we get there, we're like, next time maybe we'll fly.
Yeah, we did that road trip. It's just not fun.
Yeah. So anyways, you got Baltimore, you got Vegas. Play around here a little bit in between there, I suppose, or
yeah, I'll be playing. I generally play the Wednesday night daily here at Canterbury, and I know this weekend has something at Aces, so.
Okay.
I'll go there, play
That's
this.
the $500. All right. This might be released while that's going on, so hopefully if you're listening to this, you can look out and see how Jason's doing if we made day 2 and with a nice big bag.
So let's hope so.
Yeah. Well, going forward, this is thanks for doing this. Part of this is people get to know the players in the community, and that as we go forward, I'd love to tap your brain as we look at actually specific hand scenarios. Love to circle back, and if you're willing to do that, I'm putting you on the spot now. I'll edit this out if your answer is no, but would love to circle back at some point and get some perspectives that you have on specific hands that some of us wrecks struggle with.
Sure. Yeah, definitely could do that.
Okay. Well, any final words of wisdom for the folks out there trying to learn this game?
I mean, if you're trying to go pro, let's say, do not go pro unless you have a backup plan, because backup plans are what you need. You need to have some sort of income coming in outside of poker. I would never recommend anybody to go pro without having some sort of rental income,
some fixed income
some
stream.
fixed income that's coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's generally people that have money. Someone might die and you inherit money, but that's not the way to become a pro.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna learn the wrong ways to become a pro.
Just because the volatility of your income is just too much.
Yeah, it's definitely you definitely want to make sure you have a steady income coming in, even because you're gonna have streaks of wins and losses, and there's a lot of good days, but there's a lot more bad days than good days.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are times where I know I track everything, and I'll not cash for 15, 20 events in a row. Which, I'm playing small events, but it still hurts the bankroll that I have. And then I look at it and like, well, the cash is, if everything was perfectly random, you'd only cash 10% of the time. So really 1 out of 10 is what your cash rate is if it's a completely random thing. So 15 or 20 is not that uncommon, because you're also going to cash 3 out of 4 from time to time as well. So I can't imagine if your whole livelihood is based on that, and not just the financial piece, but now it's becomes an emotional thing.
Yeah.
I would think as well. If I need groceries, I need to cash.
And that's where,
good advice.
That's what I was talking about with where money is tighter, you play differently. I mean, if you have a steady income and, your family life is, if you're stressed at all, someone's giving you a bad time, you're having a bad day, that is not the time to play poker.
Yeah, and I've noticed that too. Like if I go play, sorry, I'm taking I interrupt too much, but I completely 100% agree with that. Like if I've had a bad day at work, I'm planning to go play poker, I'll still go play, because for me it's like if I have the opportunity, I will take it.
Sure.
But there has to be a really strong correlation for me between stressful work day and my poker results, or an argument at home and the results, or whatever it is.
And do the opposite. If you're having a good day, generally poker, you're going to do well. It kind of family life and poker intertwine in that way. If you're having a good day, you're probably going to win in poker. If you have a bad day, you're probably going to donate.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for your time again, and we'll catch you in a few months and catch up with how the World Series went.
Sounds
You
good.
can show me your bracelet.
Yeah, I wish.
All right, see ya. All right, well, once again, thanks to Jason Seitz for taking the time to be with us on the Rec Poker Podcast. If you're not already, follow us on Twitter at Rec Poker. There's also a Facebook group out there called Rec Poker. There's also a page, but we engage more with the group, so I'd recommend going out there, posting your comments. Who would you like to hear from? What are some situations you'd like us to dig into a little bit, or any other feedback that you have for the show? If we don't know about feedback, then it's hard to change things. So if there's anything that you'd like to see done differently, or any advice or any suggestions, feel free to shoot it out there. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So once again, thanks for joining us for the show, and we will catch you next week when we will have an interview with Aaron Johnson, who many of you know from Red Wing, Minnesota. Fantastic interview, great young player. So stay tuned next week and tell your friends all about the podcast. Thanks much.